It is episode 122 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week I watch and analyze. This past week it was 23 hours of Fox News, and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Now, why on earth is it 23 from last week and not 15 like it's supposed to be, like this whole project was designed to be? Well, that's because something really horrible happened on Saturday night. As you can probably guess, somebody tried to kill Donald J. Trump, and things got crazy. So Sunday, I picked up an extra 8 hours, which I had to go through, which I was still working my way through pretty late yesterday, and then had to compile it all together to make this newsletter podcast today. I'm 2 days behind on the RNC. I have no idea how I'm going to catch up. I'm out of my mind. It's been rough, but hey, at least I wasn't in a crowd and got shot by a crazy person. So life is good. I genuinely feel horrible for that poor man's family and for the two people who are critically injured. Here's the headline. Fox News, Trump is Jesus now and Biden is the dementia devil. Now, I have to explain this next clip before I play it. This is from The Five. Normally on The Five, they'll include one segment, which I call Biden bashing. These are the beginnings of segments, just Monday through Wednesday. So this is only 3 days worth of segments that were bashing Biden. This is how excessive it was. Here we go.
White House in full-blown meltdown mode after a shocking report raises more questions about the president's health, and a growing number of Democrats say he needs to call it quits.
Worse than Watergate, the Biden brain cover-up's a full-blown White House scandal. Joe's staff reportedly gives him toddler-like instructions on how to do simple things like enter and exit a room.
The liberal media is sounding more unhinged as they try to shield Joe Biden from the fallout of his growing debate disaster. Whoopi Goldberg is going the extra mile in Joe's defense.
Biden giving Dad the weekend at Bernie's treatment as he makes himself at home at the White House, joining important meetings and phone calls with top aides and controlling access to Joe.
Moments from now, President Biden about to face another critical test. Reassure world leaders that his brain's fine. And then he's up to the job as he addresses NATO's 75th anniversary summit.
President Biden arriving at the NATO summit. He's expected to address the 75th anniversary of the alliance. It comes amid other troubling reports on how his slipping mental acuity is freaking out some key allies.
President Biden expected to speak soon, but in the meantime, First Lady Jill Biden says to hell with the critics. Joe is all in on 2024, and she's right there with him.
Doppelganger George Clooney and Nancy Pelosi dropping nukes that could incinerate Joe Biden's tanking campaign. The big guy woke up this morning thinking he had survived a Democrat mutiny. Then Nancy shows up on his favorite show, Morning Breath, to knife him in the back.
Thanks to everybody for all your song suggestions. We'll play them. But right now, we have to tell you this. It looks like someone's having a blast with his opposition's meltdown. Former President Trump was jumping, or should we say pouncing, all over the Biden chaos at his rally.
It's getting harder and harder for the liberal media to cover up Joe Biden's decline, including from the guy who interviewed the president just 5 days ago. Stephanopoulos caught on camera giving his brutally honest take on President Biden.
Just how fried is the president's brain and how long has his inner circle kept things covered up? Listen to this Biden biographer.
So putting all those segments together reminded me of a Jim Gaffigan joke. It's a famous joke. He's very, very well known for this joke. He jokes about Hot Pockets, but he also jokes about working at a Mexican restaurant and how people would say, "What's in a chimichanga?" And he'd explain, well, there's meat and beans and cheese and lettuce and tomatoes and salsa. And they'd go, okay, what's in a taco? And he'd go, well, there's meat and cheese and lettuce and tomato with a crisp tortilla. Okay, so what's in a burrito? And he'd go, okay, there's beef and cheese and lettuce and tomato. That's what it felt like, because like every single segment, they were just trying to take the same elements and make it seem like it was a new story. And I'm like, this is one of them. You can hear it in that montage. 2 back-to-back was Biden speaking at NATO. And they were just like, Biden's speaking at NATO. They're all going to think he's a dum-dum. And then the next the next segment in the same show, mind you, was like, Biden speaking at NATO. And they're all going to be alarmed by his words. Like, you just did that segment. You just did it. You just did it and you spent 7 minutes on it and now you're doing it again. What is going on here? This is the taco chimichanga burrito. Same ingredients. You're just sort of slightly altering them. I love Mexican food, by the way. I love American Mexican food because that's what I know. Taco Bell fan since high school because it's a place that vegetarians could eat easily. Anyway, big fan. Don't mean to diss Mexican food. I love it. At least Americanized Mexican food. I don't know. I grew up in Missouri. Not a lot of culture. Not a lot of experience. Anyway, moving on. We'll actually read what I wrote here because there's a lot to get to in this episode. So last week, Fox News started off with a festival of nonstop Biden bashing as Fox hosts and guests alike lambasted the president and called for him to drop out of the presidential race or resign. Fox producers didn't even mix things up with other stories. They simply found new ways to trash Biden. On Saturday, former President Donald J. Trump narrowly survived what the Secret Service and law enforcement are calling an assassination attempt during an outdoor rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania. A 20-year-old gunman scaled the roof of a nearby building and got 8 shots off towards the former president before he was shot and killed by snipers. 1 spectator was killed and 2 others were critically injured. The motive of the shooter is still unknown. Fox News added an extra hour to Fox and Friends Sunday, along with special Sunday evening episodes of its primetime lineup, with most of the programs foregoing commercial breaks or only taking one near the end of each episode. Nearly 100% of the airtime in each broadcast was dedicated to the shooting. The network spent most of its time deifying Trump as an invincible supernatural being, while hosts openly called the event a miracle and evoked Jesus Christ by name. Of course, it is a national tragedy that any political candidate would be targeted for violence regardless of party affiliation. A person with a gun should not decide the political fate of an entire nation, and I believe that strongly. Anyone exclusively watching Fox News last week might not know that an economic indicator showed a decline in inflation, or that a black man was killed by security guards in an incident that is eerily like the murder of George Floyd. Shows I covered last week: Fox and Friends, The Five, Hannity, and then on Sunday, 5 hours of Fox and Friends Sunday, The Ingram Angle, the Sunday edition, which is bizarre, Jesse Watters Primetime, and Hannity also on Sunday, and all they did was talk about this attempted assassination. And when I say normally an hour of Fox is really 40 minutes when you cut the commercials out, all of these were 55 to 60 minutes long. So that's why this podcast is so late. This is the latest I've ever dropped a podcast for my weekly podcast. We're technically in Wednesday. That's how pathetic this is. But I am holding on for dear life because the RNC started on Monday, and I'm doing the best I can, folks. I'm doing the best I can. So just absolutely, what a weekend. Horrible event. I do genuinely feel terrible for the family of the man who was killed, especially after watching a lot of Fox. I'll explain as we get to that portion of this podcast, but it's been really rough. I really feel for his family. I also feel for the 2 people who were critically injured who did absolutely nothing wrong. I don't care if they love Trump. If they go to a Trump rally, that's their right as Americans. Nobody should get injured or killed for going to a political rally. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, and I would say that even about the worst people on the planet, like, we shouldn't be killing people, regardless. Just horrible, 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 horrible. So before we get into the attempted assassination attempt, we're going to keep it light. This is from the beginning of the week. This is a really goofy clip. This is Jesse Watters. This clip went viral, which was unexpected. I thought it was funny, but I didn't know that the rest of the world would find this funny. Sam Cedar over at Majority Report picked it up, and I always find this hilarious. I don't know why they do this on the Majority Report. I mean, just happy they give me a plug, and they showed my logo. But he refers to Decoding Fox News as they. There's no they, unless you count Odin and Thor, my cats. I do everything myself, so that's funny to me. And I've been a fan of Sam Cedar since he was on Air America Radio. That's a bazillion years ago. I'm Gen X. So anyway, I used to have an Air America cap. That has to be like, I can't imagine that many of them were made. I lost it at some point. Tragedy. Anyway, huge fan of Air America Radio. Huge fan. Anyway, this is a clip. This is from Thursday. This is the 5. I don't even know how to describe this clip because it's so bonkers. Jesse Watters, ladies and gentlemen. Jesse Watters.
So Joe should just go out tonight and say, I'm tied in the latest ABC News poll.
Yep.
What are you guys talking about? Reagan was down. JFK was down. Mm-hmm. These people came back and won. I've come back and won. The red wave never happened. I would just throw that right in their face, and then I would stop criticizing Democrats, because that's what the Democrats are getting mad at, is Joe's just criticizing them. And he needs to make this about Trump again. He said, I beat him once, I'm going to beat him again. And we're running to restore democracy, and you guys want to rip away millions of people who voted for me. Mm-hmm. You can't just change the rules in the middle of an election and just say, oh, you know what? My candidate's probably going to lose. The polls are bad. Let's just rip them off the ticket. When has that ever happened before? It's never happened before in the history of this country, when just because a candidate is down in the polls, right before the convention, he's gone. They're not ripping him off this ticket because of his mental state. They're ripping him off because they think he's going to lose. The Democrats can't lose one election? It's one election, Richard. And Trump's only going to get in for 4 more years, and then you guys will get back with Gavin. Everybody knows. So it's like lose an election. Like you're just going to just throw this democracy up in the air and just shoot it with a cannon? That's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Okay, for starters, the candidates used to be picked at the party's conventions. This is how we used to do it. The fact that we stretch the electoral process out this crazy long now is just a little nuts. Our election cycle is insanely long compared to other countries. So yeah, we're not throwing out democracy, and just the audacity of him to be like, "How dare you not just lose another election?" Which, like, Jesse Watters, hi, let's sit down. Just sit down. Just sit down and shut up. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to be like Judge Jeanine here. Your network, for years, promoted the idea that the 2020 election was stolen. That's how much you could not accept losing an election. You did this to a point that you got sued by not 1, but 2 voting systems. Smartmatic is still coming down the pike, guys. Smartmatic is still coming down the pike. Some billionaire helped them out and gave them money to keep their lawsuit going. It's going. It's just slow. Civil suits are slow. But that's still moving. That's moving through the court system, so fear not. But Dominion Voting Systems, I should say, got a $787.5 million settlement out of Fox. It's $750 million because Fox lied about an election. So shut up, Jesse Watters. Clutch your pearls. I can't even believe you had the audacity to say that. I mean, it's just amazing, the lack of self-awareness. So yes, we're starting out funny. We're starting out goofy. Moving on. This next one is Thursday. I also want to say very briefly that there was a slight turn near the end of the week. Because of that monologue, that bizarro monologue, and then Sean Hannity was also sort of starting to pivot to say, well, maybe Biden should stay in, and it was basically because it would make it easier for Trump to win. They're starting to do that now. So who knows what's going to happen this week because it's RNC, but whatever. Moving on, this next clip, I did one of my favorites. It's also from Thursday, where I took a clip from Fox, and I'm gluing it next to a clip from the PBS NewsHour. Now, this is from Fox and Friends, and they're talking about Project 2025. And if you're a follower of this account, you know I've done a crazy amount of research on that. More is coming, more is coming, more is coming. So here we go. We're going to start with Brian Kilmeade from Fox and Friends.
For every elected Democrat in Washington, D.C., Joe Biden is an existential threat to their jobs at the Capitol.
And they want to make it that Trump is the threat. And that's what they keep saying. We got to stop Donald Trump from making us a dictatorship. And this Project 2025 is their new mantra. Please don't buy it. It's a 900-page think tank book that's very interesting. A lot of the stuff is good. It's well-researched, but it has nothing to do with Trump, even though he had some staffers on there.
It was Heritage Foundation,
yeah,
right?
And they did
Which
a great
is very
job.
well respected.
Right. Kevin Roberts does a great job. He could defend it. It doesn't mean it's Trump who wrote it. And, you don't have to reach. If you don't like Donald Trump, look at the platform for the RNC and have fun with that. He wrote it.
So this is later that same day on the PBS NewsHour. This is Laura Barone Lopez.
That's right. Former President Donald Trump is essentially saying that he knows nothing about Project 2025, that he doesn't know who's behind it. But, Jeff, multiple authors of Project 2025 worked in Donald Trump's White House, and they're expected to potentially work in a second Donald Trump White House if he were to win re-election. This specifically, Project 2025, the blueprint about giving the presidency more power in a Republican White House, as well as gutting federal agencies, restricting abortion across the board. Those are things that Biden's campaign really believes that is going to help President Biden strike that contrast. They see that that voters are actually starting to take stock of it, that voters are paying more attention to this blueprint, that they do see it as being connected to former President Donald Trump. And so ultimately, you're going to see more from President Biden's campaign playing ads about this, as well as they think it's going to be the way to keep voters on President Biden's side, even in the aftermath of this debate.
So while I was watching that segment, Lauren Barone Lopez does an incredible job. She's an excellent interviewer. She's very poised with difficult people. I think she just is a phenomenal journalist. I was like screaming the numbers at her because I'm running my own media company. So because I am a newsroom of one, I'm going to kind of put more time and effort into specific things because unlike, I'm sure at PBS, they're all dealing with multiple stories that don't overlap and all of that fun stuff like a normal journalist. But because I'm niche, I'm super specific, I can dedicate a crazy amount of time to one thing, which is what I did this weekend. So I went through, it's 277 contributors. If you follow this account, you may have seen my post on this. It's print. It's kind of boring because it's just basically one super long list. But I went through all 277 contributors, every single name, and I have hyperlinks to back it all up. I couldn't put the hyperlinks into Substack because the formatting would have been nuts because they don't really let you put a table in Substack. I couldn't figure out how to put a nice, neat table, so I had to do it from Data Wrapper. Don't worry about it. I just couldn't do it exactly how I wanted to do it. But I do, in my own spreadsheet, have hyperlinks for every single individual on that list. So this took hours and hours and hours of me looking every single person up. There was 277 contributors and 36 authors. The number on the authors is a little blurry because the president of the Heritage Foundation is also included. So the number is technically 38. 2 of them are editors. I've also gone through all of them. And I found exactly who worked for Trump. I looked for who was Trump campaign, Trump transition team, Trump cabinet member, Trump staff member, and lined them up. And it was 75%, roughly 3/4 of the authors. Those are the people who actually wrote the chapters. Contributors, they didn't technically write the chapters, but they contributed in some way. Over half of them were also Trump, former Trump. So that's 75% of the authors, over half of the contributors, all Trump. So this has got Trump all over it. And again, as I said in the last podcast, Trump's name shows up on 194 pages of this crazy long document. So yes, and I wish more people would use my research. It's available to anyone. Especially the stuff about Trump. I took the paywall off of that part so anybody can look that up. And like I said, I can back it all up. I just couldn't format it correctly for Substack. And as I noted in my document, my research document that I just posted, there were 7 people who had names that were so common or that when I looked them up, multiple people showed up. I could not figure out who was the person that was connected to Heritage Foundation. There's no way of knowing. I just couldn't find anything on these people. Their name was either super common or 4 other people with the exact same name showed up and they were all sort of political. And I was just like, I can't make a call on these people. So there's 7 of them I didn't know. but only 7. Everybody else I hunted down. ProPublica had a list that went to 2019, so that database was very helpful. I got a number of them from that database. LinkedIn was incredibly helpful. I was on LinkedIn all day, just one right after the other. Because LinkedIn, it would show the exact resume, exactly when they worked. And I also double checked to make sure if it said State Department that they actually were working in the State Department under Trump, because some of them were under George W. Bush. So it was a journey. It was a journey. That thing took me forever. So next up, before we move to the next transition, because we are going to shift, because we're going to start talking about the assassination, or attempted assassination, I should give a shout out to my sponsor, and that sponsor would be the listeners to this podcast and the readers of my Substack channel, my newsletter, also my Patreon supporters. Thank you very much, everybody. So I am 100% funded through crowdsourced funding. I have no large donor, no large sponsor, no advertisers. If you want to become a financial supporter of this micro budget media project, you can go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. All paid supporters and paid subscribers get exclusive content, and that includes stuff on Project 2025, which is coming up. I'm going to be downloading more stuff this week, and that's about it. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, paid supporter, share this podcast, share the newsletter. That helps tremendously. Now, this next montage is from the marathon of Fox and Friends Sunday. The voice that you're probably not going to recognize is, after Rachel Campos-Duffy, is Representative Cory Mills. He's a Republican from Florida. And this is Trump is almost Jesus now. So buckle up. This gets weird.
A lot of people saying that wisp of wind.
God breathed.
It's the Holy Spirit.
It is that easy of a shot. And so this is by miracle. This is by the divine intervention. This is by God's protection. And Rachel's correct. Every time you see so many people placing hands on him, so many people who are praying over him, we know Ephesians 6 when it talks about the armor of God. And his response, let me tell you, President Trump was not fearful. He was pissed off that someone just tried to take his life. He is standing there willing to take that bullet for us as the American people. And we have to recall the fact that when he stood up, he did not stand in fear. He stood to chant, fight, 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 because he's fighting for America. He's fighting for this republic, and he's fighting for every one of us who are sitting here right now talking about this incident.
Yeah, you're so right. It's just a millimeter probably of a difference. He's an animated speaker, so he moves around. He was referencing something on, he had a big screen up talking about immigration and the terrible numbers that have changed in the wrong direction since he was elected. And I think it was that kind of movement. But there was something else that if you're a believer, and there are a lot of people who pray for this man. I've actually talked to him about it. We talked about it in our interview. I talked to him off camera once about it, and he has told me that he has always welcomed the prayers of so many, and how many people come up to him and pray over him. I don't think any president, Pete and Will, has had more photos taken of him having people laying hands over him and praying, and you have to wonder if those prayers, I personally believe that is what protected him in that moment, and history would have absolutely been changed in that moment. Let's not forget that there is somebody in that crowd who died, that there are 2 people who are critically injured, and that everybody in that crowd went in there with hope for the future.
So there were other examples of this, Jesus saved Trump. And I did include that one because she did actually mention the person who died and the 2 people who were injured. In most cases, they didn't. So there's like a dark layer here. I'm not religious. I was raised strict Catholic. There was child molesters in my parish, priests who were child molesters. I just completely disillusioned on multiple levels. I'm not judging anyone who is religious. This got really hard to listen to because I kept thinking, so God saved Trump, but he didn't care about that poor father who was 50 years old, who apparently was a huge, went to church every Sunday and was very devout and a family man and the whole 9 yards. And you're thinking, it's a little dark to constantly keep talking about this quote unquote miracle when somebody died. And 2 people are critically injured. I don't know how bad their injuries were, but that was just really dark. It got really dark, and I was just like, please just stop. And I get it, but it all gets kind of relative, because again, somebody's suffering horribly, and somebody isn't. So I was very uncomfortable watching this, just very uncomfortable. And apparently now something may have changed in the past 48 hours, but apparently President Biden reached out to the family of the man who was killed at the rally. And the wife said, I don't want to speak to you. He was a hardcore Republican. I understand. I don't blame you for what happened. But Trump has not reached out to her. There was a GoFundMe that was set up, but there's been no personal engagement of like, I'm sorry your husband was killed at my rally. You'd think that would be fairly easy for him to do, but he hasn't done that for whatever reason. The whole thing is just awful. It's just awful. I'm not gonna say, and another, very briefly, I'm just gonna touch this. As a journalist, I have to see hard evidence of something before I believe it. I have to have something that's verifiable. And I will say this, and man, this is so hard, partly because Trump lies so much. He just lies and lies and lies and lies. He lies about things that are provably easy to, figure out. Like his inauguration, saying he had the largest inauguration in the history of our country. He very clearly did not. Saying, like he won the 2020 election when he very clearly did not. The man lies about things that are easy to look up. He lies about everything. So I understand why people think that this may have been staged or a hoax or whatever. I don't think that it was. I think that this was a real thing that happened. However, that first clip that was released to the public, it did look very sketchy because he just popped down and then magically pops up and has blood on his side of his face. And it looked at first that nobody was injured behind him. And I thought, well, where'd the bullets go? That seems nuts. So if it just grazed him, where's the person behind him that died? Well, somebody did die. And then the shooter was killed, which to me is hard evidence that this was a real event. But I just wanted to address that because, like I said, easily half my friends on social media think it was fake. This is what happens when you lie all the time. Like, I kind of blame Trump for that. The fact that people think this is a hoax, because he's such a showman and he's always lying. And he like when he ran for president. I mean, this is part of why he's so noxious as a human being, because he's created so much distrust in our political system. When he announced his presidency, the candidacy, I should say, when he announced his candidacy in 2015, this is a well-documented situation. His campaign hired actors for $50 a pop to show up and act like they were supporters. So this is why people don't believe that this is a real event. This is part of the reason why people think this is a hoax. I don't think that it is, and I can't humor that because, again, I don't have hard evidence. Now, this next clip is by somebody named Tom Homan. I've talked about him before. Tom Homan was the former acting director of ICE, which ICE is Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. He referred to Donald J. Trump as a warrior president. So get out your barf bags if you're like me. Get out your barf bags. Get out your barf bags. I'm going to do my Midwestern accent. Where's this coming from? I don't know, but I'm from Missouri. Some people say Missouri if you're from the southern portion of the state. Believe it or not, both Missouri and Missouri are considered proper pronunciations. I know. What is that about? How does a state have 2 different ways to pronounce it? I don't know, but Missouri, the show me state, does. Doing this goofy voice. Tom Homan kind of has a goofy voice. Anyway, this is from Sunday. Again, part of the marathon of Fox and Friends Sunday. Tom Homan, ladies and gentlemen.
There's a lot of stuff going on, so I don't blame the Secret Service a bit about the men and women on the ground who saved the president's life. And let's talk about the president. When the shots were heard, he did exactly as he was trained and got down behind that podium because he's been trained. There's security precautions around that podium that will protect him. And I'll say this, when they finally did get him up, you see him move a Secret Service agent aside to let the American people know he's okay and that he's going to continue to fight. This proves, once again, the same thing I've been saying for 4 years in this network. He is a warrior. He is a man's man. He is not a coward. He's a brave person that wants to come back and make this country great. He wants to, and he loves law enforcement. And for him to stand up after that issue and put himself in harm's way, which probably wasn't the best safety move he made, but he wanted the American people to know he's good and he's going to continue to fight. That man is just a warrior, and people need to understand that. I think last night proved it.
So I have talked about Tom Homan before. I am not a fan of Tom Homan. People associate the family separation program, that's where the U.S. government took children away from their parents, with Stephen Miller. They do that because Stephen Miller was a big advocate for this program, and he's very outspoken. He gets a lot of press. Tom Homan, who you just heard there, has kind of a strange-sounding voice. He's not as charismatic. He's more of like he's calling himself a former cop, when I'm like, no, you were the acting director of ICE. I don't know why you're changing your title. Anybody can look this up. But Tom Homan, he's also one of the contributors to the 2025 project, by the way. He's on that list. Tom Homan is the one that wrote the program. He came up with this idea. So he developed and defended the family separation program that the Trump administration initiated at our southern border. Adults entering the U.S. illegally were detained and criminally charged. Any accompanied children under the age of 18 were handed over to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which shipped them miles away from their parents and scattered them among 100 Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, shelters and other care arrangements across the country. I just want to give you a heads up. If you want to look up any of this information in the newsletter, this paragraph is hyperlinked with an inch of its life. Some excellent articles with great resources that go into much more detail that I could fit into the newsletter or the podcast. So if you want to read more about it. The U.S. government failed to create a system to reunite the families. Again, this is during the Trump administration. ICE had no organization or plan for reunification for the separated families. Many parents were deported while their children were still in the U.S. Phone numbers and other information that could have been used to locate the parents was lost or missing. More than 5,000 children were separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border between 2017 and 2021. So President Biden ended the program, and a month after he was inaugurated, he established a task force on family reunification. And according to reporting by New York Magazine in an article from February 2024, out of more than 5,000 children separated from their parents by the Trump administration, as many as 2,000 still haven't been reunited. So I just want to add, Homan, who again is a contributor for Project 2025, has said multiple times, pretty much every time he's on Fox, if he can find a way to work it in, he said, oh, I'm going to go back to work for Trump if he wins the election. And Trump has not denied this. And Trump now just apparently just said he would absolutely hire Homan to come back and do this again. Oh, yeah. There was a law passed by Congress to prevent this from happening again. But who knows if they'll try to work around it. So can't make that up. Just absolutely horrible. And this man's calling Trump a warrior. So this one is also very disturbing. This is a man named Gino DeFabio. Now, they did not reveal this during the segment, but I looked it up because he'd mentioned something in his appearance that made me think that he was more than just a random person. So he's a former Republican candidate for Mahoning County Commissioner. He did not win, but he appeared on Fox and Friends to share what he witnessed about the shooting at the Trump rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania. So again, they passed him off as just a random person who happened to be there, but he's actually incredibly politically active. And this is what he said.
With us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Would love to hear your perspective on what went down yesterday. Where were you, and what did you experience?
I'll tell you exactly what happened, but before I do that, I want to say one thing. You know, for everybody's mentioned it this morning, and for the last 7 years, my first time on Fox and Friends was about 7 years ago. That morning, Trump saw me on your show. I was on a stage. I met with the guy. This guy is doing more for the American people than anybody knows. I want to demand as an American citizen that we have a July 13th committee to investigate the instigating of, they want to say that Trump instigated January 6th. I want to say they instigated the assassination attempt of our president. It should not be allowed to stand. Everybody knows the names. Pelosi, AOC, and the rest of them. Because what I have to live for, what I saw yesterday for the rest of my life, it's their fault. It's their rhetoric. Now, I'm sorry, I had to say that because I'm tired and I'm an angry American this morning.
So that man is entitled to his opinion, of course, but I would say Trump is part of the problem. Trump regularly uses dehumanizing language to describe undocumented immigrants, members of the media, Democratic opponents, and Republican critics. Trump has made several statements. Axios compiled a list, and because of time and other issues, I went ahead and cut and pasted it. I cited it twice. I'm like, I don't mean to steal your work. I'm going to give you as much credit as possible. 2 hyperlinks, one at the beginning, one at the end. I even named the entire article. I just cut and pasted this bulleted list. So here I'll give a shout out to the reporter. The name of the article is "The Times Trump Has Advocated for Violence" by Ivana Sarek. This was published in May 2022. Here we go. Axios. July 2017, Trump's talking to law enforcement. He's talking about when they arrest people. He says, please don't be too nice. August 2017, right after Charlottesville, the entire statement he made was problematic. Entire statement. But he said many sides were to blame, failing to really distinguish between those who participated in the Unite the Right rally and those who showed up in opposition to it. That's been, analyzed within an inch of its life. October 2018, he was speaking in Montana. He praised the then Representative Greg Gianforte. That was the state's current governor. This person assaulted a reporter. And he said, this is what Trump said of this man who tried to beat up a reporter. Any guy who can do a body slam, he's my type. In October 2019, a New York Times report outlined various strategies Trump had allegedly deliberated to keep migrants away from the U.S. southern border, including a water-filled trench with snakes or alligators and shooting migrants in the legs to slow them down. In May 2020, Trump used violent rhetoric when referring to protests in Minneapolis in the wake of George Floyd's killing, tweeting, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." The phrase has a racist history going back to police brutality against Black Americans in the 1960s. June 2020, Trump threatened to use U.S. military to quell Black Lives Matter protests across the country. Quote, "If a city or state refuses to take the actions necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them." End quote. August 2020, Trump expressed interest in sending the National Guard to Portland, Oregon to confront protesters. Per Vox, there's a hyperlink there, we could fix Portland in, I would say, 45 minutes. And of course, he also, and this is just, I can't pull the exact dates, but we all saw clips of him saying stuff like, when protesters would show up to his rallies, he'd say, back in the day, they'd take you out on a stretcher. He'd say this directly to their face as this mob is screaming at them. He's called the press the enemy of the people. He's used horrific language to describe undocumented immigrants. He frequently refers to them as animals. He's called them snakes. He reads that ridiculous poem where he basically says undocumented immigrants are snakes that are going to kill everybody. It's just awful. Now, this last clip is just for fun. It's 3 clips of Judge Jeanine saying crazy things. I wanted to put it in there to give some levity because this last week was so rough. Nobody wants to see anybody get assassinated or almost assassinated. Nobody. I don't care. I hate Trump. If you know me at all, you know I can't stand him. I call him a lunatic, a liar, a narcissist. I think he's a sociopath. I think he's incredibly dangerous, but I don't think he should be killed. I don't think that's how we solve our problems in this country. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So next up, just to keep it light, Judge Jeanine saying a bunch of stupid things. We're going to start with Tuesday, and then we go to Thursday, and then Sunday. Just because I want to let this thing rip. We go Tuesday, this is from the 5, Thursday, the 5, and Sunday, she was on the special episode of Hannity. Here we go, Judge Jeanine.
Are you going to believe the White House that we know is not honest with us, or West Germany that said we did it to accommodate you guys and Blinken came?
So she just referred to West Germany as if it's an actual country right now in 2024. West Germany ceased to be after the reunification of Germany in 1990, about a year before the Soviet Union fell. Okay, as a Gen X person, I fell over laughing, and I said, did she just say West Germany? That again was during a clip about Biden's mental acuity. So I think Miss Pirro might also have some issues there. Okay, next clip.
And I want you to think about the next 5 months, because who's running the country? A crack addict, a former crack addict, sex addict, and a make-believe doctor are running the country. And that's not a good place to be.
I just clipped that because that's your classic Judge Jeanine. Just a crack addict is running this country and a make-believe doctor. Give me a break, Jill Biden. You're drunk with power. You just want to wear those little outfits and curl your hair and say, I'm the first lady. Well, I'm Judge Jeanine. Okay, next clip.
So if they put her at the top of the ticket, aside from the fact that the woman can't put a sentence together, he can't put two sentences together. You can't understand the two sentences she puts together. So, you know.
By the way,
Yeah.
But Judge.
What?
What excuse? He has an excuse. What's hers?
I don't know. I have an idea, but I'm not going to say it in public. I think she likes to have a good time.
Oh, boy.
Okay?
I just want to point out right now that is Judge Jeanine Pirro, the woman with incredible shoes, wacky outfits, and a lover of dogs, is implying that another human being has a problem with alcohol. Sit on that for a minute. Rest on that. Breathe that in. Bathe in it. Judge Jeanine is saying that someone else has a problem with alcohol. Look in the mirror, Judge Jeanine. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, okay? Every time I post about her, people call her box of wine. People make comments. There's times where I'm like, is she gonna fall over? Is she gonna fall over? I don't know. I'm Judge Jeanine, and I'm completely, perfectly sober. How dare you? Okay, next up. Oh my goodness. See, that's why I saved that for the end. I was like, this is a rough week. I'm going to put something goofy in at the end. The goofy thing will be Judge Jeanine. She made a few random weirdo. West Germany, though, is still my favorite. That's 34 years. Just off by 34 years. 34. No biggie. West Germany. West Germany. Do you think the Berlin Wall still exists? Do you think that it still exists, Judge Jeanine? What about communism in the Soviet Union? Do you think that's still a thing? I bet you do. Anyway, moving on. My goodness. Stories Fox News ignored. Every week I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. Fox News often ignores major stories that don't align with its agenda. The following list are stories PBS covered that Fox News ignored. I also included hours from Sunday. I also picked up the PBS episode from Sunday. It's very short. Their Sunday episodes are like 30 minutes long, but I did catch it and did include it in all of the data for this week. So here we go. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. At least 25 were killed after an Israeli airstrike hit a school that had been turned into a shelter in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Israel ordered the evacuation of Gaza City as it prepares for another military strike on the area. Ceasefire talks between Hamas and Israel are ongoing. The U.S. is considering abandoning efforts to reinstall a pier that has been used to help get humanitarian aid into Gaza. The project has been plagued by rough seas, which have led to maintenance problems. Updates in the Ukraine war. Russian missiles leveled a wing of a children's hospital in Kyiv, killing 42 and injuring nearly 200. Russia has denied responsibility for the attack, insisting it doesn't attack civilian targets in Ukraine, despite abundant evidence to the contrary, including AP reporting. That's Associated Press. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Russian President Vladimir Putin at a lavish state dinner in Moscow. The relationship between India and Russia remains strong as Indian purchases of Russian oil have dramatically increased since the start of the war in Ukraine. Ukraine should have as many as 60 American-made F-16 fighter jets later this summer, as the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and Norway have all committed to donating planes to the Ukraine war effort. Moving on to the rest of the stories, Bloomberg Philanthropies donated a $1 billion gift to Johns Hopkins University to make medical school free for a majority of students, while also increasing financial aid for students at its schools of nursing, public health, and other graduate schools. Just want to give a quick shout out. Craig Newmark of the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, this is months ago, also donated a very large amount to my grad school for this exact same purpose, so people can go tuition free. Shout out to Craig Newmark. I'm sure he's not listening, but I just want to say thank you for that. It means a lot. PBS produced a segment about the lingering health effects many Maui residents still grapple with after the devastating wildfire that caused widespread damage on a small Hawaiian island last year. After the last election in France, no party won a majority of seats in the newly elected National Assembly. Lawmakers are due to elect the lower house National Assembly's president, equivalent to a speaker, who organizes the chamber's agenda and runs debate. A Russian court has ordered the arrest in absentia of Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who died in Russian custody. Navalnaya lives outside of Russia, but she would be immediately taken into custody if she returned to her home country. The CPI, this is good news, Consumer Price Index, had its first monthly decline since May 2020, giving some hope that the Federal Reserve could cut interest rates. A fire was put out in Our Lady of Assumption Cathedral in Rouen, in the northern region of Normandy of France. The construction of the Rouen Cathedral dates from the 12th century. It was built and rebuilt over a period of 800 years. It was a favorite subject of French Impressionist Claude Monet in the 19th century. The House of Representatives rejected an inherent contempt resolution against Attorney General Merrick B. Garland over his refusal to release audio recordings of a special counsel interview with President Joe Biden. The House already has a certified transcript of the interview. Special counsel Hur has testified that the transcript is accurate. AT&T disclosed that it had a major security breach that affected 109 million customer accounts. The compromised data includes detailed recordings of calls and texts, providing a comprehensive log of customer communications during this period. The breach did not involve the content of communications or highly sensitive personal information, such as social security numbers. The first victim for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre has been identified using DNA from remains found in a mass grave. A white mob killed over 300 black people over the span of 2 days in a racially motivated attack of the community then known as Black Wall Street. C.L. Daniel was a World War I veteran who was passing through the area when he was killed. His descendants have been notified about his remains. On June 30th, Devonte Mitchell, a black man, was killed by security guards after being held down at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in downtown Milwaukee. His death has many similarities with the killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. At the time of his death, Mitchell was experiencing a mental health episode. The security guards have been fired, and the investigation into Mitchell's death is ongoing. Actress Shelley Duvall died at the age of 75 due to long-term complications from diabetes. She's best known for her role in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. She also appeared in several Robert Altman films. Fitness guru Richard Simmons died at his Hollywood Hills home the day after his 76th birthday. Simmons built a fitness empire, founding gyms, producing workout videos, and diet plans. He was known for his eccentric personality and humor. Actress Shannon Doherty died at the age of 53 after battling breast cancer for nearly a decade. She was best known for her roles on Beverly Hills 90210 and Charmed. She began her career while still a child, appearing on Little House on the Prairie and the Wilford Brimley family drama Our House. She also had a starring role in the cult classic film Heathers. Gail Walensky, former CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator, died at 81. Walensky worked for more than 30 years at Project Hope, a global health and humanitarian organization. She also had a senior White House appointment during the last year of the George W. H. Bush presidency. Whew, that's a lot. A lot of more obituaries there. Fox didn't mention any of those. You'd think at least they got Shelley Duvall. They didn't even get Shelley Duvall, which is a shame. She's a wonderful actress. So by the numbers, every week I compare the top 5 topics on Fox to the top 5 topics on PBS NewsHour. We're going to start with Fox. Number 1, 41%, Trump assassination attempt, 40%, Biden bashing, so almost exactly. Promotion of Trump, 7%. 3% was Kamala bashing, as in Kamala Harris, and 2% was dedicated to the NATO summit. PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics. Number 1, Biden's future as a candidate for president, 30%. Artist profile, 10%, that's various things. 6%, Trump assassination attempt. Ukraine war, 5%. And 5% was dedicated to an interview with the Chancellor of Germany. They talked about multiple things, including Ukraine war, but it was multiple topics. It was a fascinating interview. Highly recommend. Finally, words used on Fox for the week ending July 14th, 2024. Biden, 933 times. Trump, 901. Shooter or shooting, 203. God, 110. Obama, 95. Border, 63. Hunter, 43. Crime, 34. Economy, 30. Israel, 24. Hillary, 19. China, 18. Miracle, 17. Migrant, 17. Dropout, 16. Warrior, 9. Jesus, 6. And AOC, 5. And that's it for the podcast. It was a doozy. I'm exhausted. I still have tons of work to catch up with, so I will get up to speed for this week. Thanks for listening. If you want to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News. You go to my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. The cats, the mascots for the podcast, Odin and Thor, also send their love. Odin is currently on my lap, being very chill. Odin likes attention, so there you go. He's a big black cat. And you can also find my work on Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Blue Sky. And you can find a version of this podcast on the Resolute Square YouTube page if you want to listen to it that way. Thank you so much for listening. I'm exhausted. I'll be back for the next one that will be dedicated to the Republican National Convention. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Thank you all for coming to my one-woman show. It's nice to meet ya. Will we meet again? I'll never know. You can smell my leather from my head to my toes. Smile for the camera. I'll see you on my video.
Resolute Square.